What avoidants hope for when you go contact? There's something both empowering and terrifying about going no contact with someone who pulled away from you, especially if they're what we call an avoidant. It's that kind of connection where you felt them retreat, grow distant, close off, and you made the difficult decision to stop chasing and reclaim your power. But here's what's rarely talked about. What do avoidants secretly hope for when you go no contact? The first thing to know is avoidants don't stop caring. They just fear feeling too much. So when you pull back, when you finally stop texting, calling, checking in, it creates a space they didn't prepare for. And in that silence, a lot happens. Here's what they're hoping for, even if they won't admit it out loud. When someone with avoidant tendencies pulls away and you go no contact, there's a quiet but powerful dynamic at play. Despite how cold or indifferent they may have seemed, most avoidants actually hope that you still care. Just from a distance. They don't want you too close because closeness triggers their fear of being overwhelmed, controlled, or losing their autonomy. But at the same time, they don't want to feel forgotten. So when you disappear, even if it's what they said they wanted, it stirs something in them. The silence can feel like a threat to their unspoken need for reassurance. They want to believe that they mattered, that you're still thinking about them, even if you're no longer acting on those feelings. This creates a strange internal tension for them. On the surface, they may seem relieved. They might not reach out. They might even act as if they're moving on just fine. But underneath, they often fantasize that you're still emotionally attached. They hope you're silently suffering, missing them, wondering what they're doing, and waiting for a sign. That fantasy gives them a sense of power and control. Because emotional vulnerability feels dangerous to them, if they know you still care, even if they're not reciprocating, it feeds their sense of security without forcing them to confront any of their fears or change their behavior. They want to feel wanted without having to deal with the messiness of intimacy. And that's the trap. Because they're not hoping to meet you in the middle, they're hoping you'll stay emotionally available from a distance so they don't have to take risks or feel accountable. When you go no contact, they don't always view it as a final goodbye. Instead, they interpret it as a pause, something temporary. In their mind, you're giving them space, and they assume that when they're ready, they can return and find the door still open. It's not that they want to hurt you. It's that they're emotionally wired to protect themselves at all costs, even if it comes across as cold or confusing. What they hope for in your silence is emotional proof that they still matter, but without having to face the intimacy that your presence demands. They want you to hold space for them, even though they pushed you away. So when you stop reaching out, what often hurts them most isn't the loss. It's the realization that maybe you really did walk away. Maybe this time you're not quietly caring anymore. And that unsettles them in ways they never expected. When you go no contact with someone who has avoidant tendencies, a quiet power shift begins to unfold. Even if they were the one who pulled away, created distance, or shut down emotionally, they often still expect you to be the one who comes back. Deep down, many avoidants hope you'll break first, that you'll reach out, that you'll text after a few days of silence, that you'll make the first move so they don't have to step into a space that feels vulnerable or uncertain. This isn't always a conscious plan, but it's part of the emotional pattern they've learned to rely on. Avoidants are often used to someone else doing the emotional labor, someone else soothing, apologizing, or making sense of the mess. So when you go quiet, it forces them to sit with a kind of discomfort they usually avoid at all costs. The discomfort of not knowing where they stand, and while they might appear calm on the surface, underneath they are often hoping that your silence will end before theirs has to. What makes this more complicated is that if you do reach out, it confirms something for them. It reassures them that they're still wanted, still thought about, still significant, even if they didn't do anything to deserve that reassurance. It lets them off the hook emotionally. They don't have to examine why they pulled away. or what impact that had on you, because your message tells them they haven't truly lost you. In a sense, it allows them to continue avoiding emotional responsibility. In many cases, your silence threatens their belief that they'll always be the one with the upper hand. So, while they act indifferent or even relieved by your absence, a part of them is quietly counting the days, waiting to see when you'll crack. When you'll give in, when you'll break the silence just so they don't have to. This is especially true if they've been able to rely on you emotionally in the past. If you were the one who always bridged the gap, who always reached out after a conflict, then your no contact becomes more than just a silence. It becomes unfamiliar, and unfamiliar things create anxiety. But instead of leaning into the anxiety and asking themselves why they feel unsettled, they double down on hoping that you'll relieve it for them. They hope you'll pick up the pieces again, because doing it themselves would require a level of vulnerability they've spent most of their life trying to avoid. Avoidants often view time and space as their best tools for emotional safety. When you go no contact, they don't always interpret it as a boundary or a decision rooted in self-respect. Instead, many assume it's a temporary phase, that eventually time will soften your stance, dull your intensity, and make you more open to reconnection on their terms. In their world, emotional distance is something that just needs a little time to settle before things return to a more manageable dynamic. They're not hoping you move on. They're hoping you just cool off. Avoidants are uncomfortable with emotional intensity. To them, closeness can feel like pressure, so when you withdraw and stop reaching out, they may feel a brief sense of relief. The silence removes the weight of your expectations, and it buys them time. But that doesn't mean they're writing you off. In fact, they're often hoping that your absence will mellow into nostalgia or neutrality. They think that given enough time, you won't be as angry, hurt, or emotionally charged. And when they eventually reach back out, they're counting on a warmer reception than they would have gotten before. They also use these time as a way to avoid direct conflict or resolution. For avoidance, emotional confrontation feels overwhelming and sometimes even threatening. So instead of facing the discomfort of talking things through, they hope that silence itself will do the work for them. They imagine a future where they don't need to explain or apologize because time will have smoothed over the tension. In this way, time becomes a buffer, an emotional eraser of sorts. This is why, in their mind, no contact isn't always taken as a closed door. It's seen as a temporary cooling off period. They're hoping that you won't stay strong in your boundary, but instead become more flexible with it as time passes. They want to believe that the version of you they last saw, the one who cared, who reached out, who tried, will still be there, just quieter, less reactive, and more willing to accept them if and when they choose to reappear. They count on the fact that most people don't want to stay angry or hurt forever. They rely on time to ease your emotions so they can return without facing the discomfort of growth or real change. In their mind, a distance doesn't mean the end. It just means hitting pause until they think you're ready to reconnect without demanding more than they're comfortable giving. Avoidants have a complicated relationship with emotional closeness, but something interesting happens once distance has been created. They often begin to romanticize the past. When you go no contact, the immediate emotional noise of the relationship fades, and that's exactly when their memory starts filtering reality through nostalgia. They start to remember the highs, the fun moments, the connection, the attraction, but without the pressure they felt in the actual relationship. The intensity is gone, so now they can look back on what you shared in a way that feels safer, more manageable, even sweet. This idealization serves a purpose. It allows them to maintain a connection to you without having to engage with the difficult parts that made them pull away in the first place. They're not remembering the conversations where you asked for more than they could give. They're not replaying the emotional disconnection or the times they made you feel unsure or unwanted. Instead, they're thinking about the smile you gave them when they made a dumb joke, or the comfort of knowing you were there when things got tough, or how attracted they were to the energy you brought into their life. In some cases, this nostalgia becomes a kind of emotional safety net. They convince themselves that what they had with you was special and maybe even something they could come back to eventually. But what they're really hoping is that you have started doing the same thing. They hope that in your silence, you're only remembering the good parts. That the longer you go without contact, the more you forget what it felt like to be emotionally starved or confused. They want you to miss them in the way they've begun to miss the idea of you, not the reality. This creates a skewed emotional playing field. While you're possibly healing, growing, or trying to understand what really happened, they're using selective memory as a way to avoid responsibility. They aren't necessarily thinking about how to show up differently if they reconnect. They're hoping that the past now looks so sweet in hindsight that you'll just be grateful to hear from again and welcome them back without questions. In this way, they reduce the relationship to a highlight reel, cutting out all the difficult moments that made no contact necessary in the first place. By the time they consider reaching out, they've already rewritten the story in their mind, and they're hoping you've done the same so they don't have to confront the real work of rebuilding something healthier or more honest. Avoidants often rely on emotional patterns that keep them safe from vulnerability. When you go no contact, it disrupts that pattern. But even in your silence, they're often hoping that you haven't truly changed. That deep down, you're still the same person who gave them patience, understanding, and emotional availability, whether or not they deserved it. They might miss you, but more than that, they hope that if and when they return, the emotional landscape will look familiar. That you'll still the same, want the same, and tolerate the same. They aren't necessarily hoping for your misery or stagnation, but they are afraid of your growth. Because if you've grown, that means the rules have changed. That means you might now have boundaries. You might say no. You might not be as quick to forgive or as open to letting them back into your life without clarity or accountability. And for someone who has built their emotional rhythm around being able to pull away without consequences, this possibility is deeply unsettling. If they were used to you overextending, over-explaining, or always being emotionally available, no matter how inconsistent they were, they quietly hope that those patterns are still in place. They hope your silence is temporary, not transformative. Because if your time away has helped you find your voice or your standards or your strength, then the version of you they knew is gone. And they don't know how to navigate this new version, one that might no longer accept breadcrumbs, one might no longer be afraid to walk away for good. This is why many avoidants reappear after long periods of silence, expecting things to feel the same. They believe time stands still when it comes to emotional connection. But what unsettles them most is discovering that while they were sitting in comfort or avoidance, you were evolving, you were learning, you were healing. And now you might even want what you once begged for. That shift in power terrifies them because it means they're no longer in control of how the story ends. Their hope is that nothing has really changed, that the door is still open, that your heart is still soft, and that the same version of you will be waiting. But when you show up as someone new, someone who values themselves more deeply, they're forced to confront the very growth they spent so long avoiding in themselves. And many of them simply aren't ready for that. So if you've gone no contact with an avoidant and you're sitting in the silence wondering what they're thinking, know this, it's not just absence they feel, it's uncertainty. And uncertainty makes them hope for things that keep them safe, not necessarily things that make them better. They may hope you still care. They may hope you'll be the one to break. They may hope time will do the healing for them. And they almost hope you'll be soft when they return, even if they gave you nothing firm to hold onto. But the truth is, what they hope for says more about where you are emotionally than where you should go next. You don't need to stay frozen in place to prove you cared. Growth means you can love someone and still walk away. It means you can miss them and still choose peace. It means their hope doesn't have to become your obligation. Your silence is not a punishment. It's a boundary. It's a moment where you choose to stop chasing clarity and instead started creating your own. And if someone truly wants to come back into your life, they'll have to meet you where you are now, not where they left you. Thank you for giving me your time, your attention, and your heart today. If you're navigating this kind of silence right now, I see your strength. Even if you don't yet, stay true to the version of you that's growing, healing, and refusing to settle. Take care of yourself. You deserve more than someone who only misses you when you're gone. Thank you again, and goodbye for now.